The House Elections Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Cerniglu.
Here.
Representatives Wagella.
Here.
Hope.
Here.
Colzar.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Smith.
Present.
DeBoyer.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Wagella makes a motion to adopt the minutes from the March 14, 2023 meeting. Without objections, the minutes are adopted. For today's agenda, we will have testimony from voters, not politicians. Here to present from Voters Not Politicians is Jamie Lyons-Eddy, the Deputy Director for VNP. Welcome, Ms. Lyons-Eddy.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much, Chair Cerniglu and members of the committee for inviting me to speak to you today. I am Jamie Lyons-Eddy, Deputy Director and one of the co-founders of Voters Not Politicians. About that name, we understand it gives some people pause, especially people who work around here. We came up with that name because we think voters, not politicians, should decide who wins elections and should drive public policy. We certainly are not against politicians. Some of our best friends are politicians, and we're certainly not anti-government. But we believe that politicians and our government should be representative of and responsive to the people of Michigan. And we focus on this first line of Michigan's Constitution: all political power is inherent in the people. That line is on our shirts, it's on our signs, it's on my Tumblr here, and it is the principle that guides all of our work. So today I'm going to go over a little bit of our history, let you know what we're doing now, and outline our election-related priorities for 2023. So first, we are a statewide, nonpartisan grassroots organization focused on making Michigan's government work for the people. We work to bring Michigan in line with that vision that all political power is inherent in the people by volunteer-driven action by thousands of people across the state. The map that you see here is the location of most of the volunteers who gathered signatures for the petition to put Proposal 22-2 on the ballot. As you can see, we are all over the state of Michigan, and we think we have the strongest and best organized volunteer organization out there. Part of the reason we've been so successful is that our organization was founded on the idea that all volunteers have something to offer. We welcome anybody to join our local teams, and those local teams form strong relationships with each other. Our volunteers knock doors, they make phone calls, they make presentations to local groups, they set up tables to educate voters at fairs and festivals, and as most of you know, they're really good at collecting signatures. But we also have a network of volunteers who take leadership roles and who recruit and organize teams in their communities. We have volunteers who manage supplies, who conduct policy research, who cut custom-made clipboards out of Masonite, and even volunteers who design databases to help us track petitions. We work really hard to keep those volunteers engaged, no matter where we are in the election cycle or the calendar year. And the volunteers work hard because they know that we're here to help them get what they care about, which is a stronger democracy. Our organization came together when a group of everyday Michiganders were concerned and ready to enact structural democracy reform, specifically to end political gerrymandering at the statewide level in Michigan. We learned that despite long odds, political change is possible with collective action and strong organization. On the cold, rainy day in December of 2017, when we turned in more than 428,000 signatures to the Bureau of Elections, Voters Not Politicians did not have a single person on payroll. By the end of that campaign, we had more than 6,500 volunteers involved and over 14,000 individual donors. This was a truly grassroots effort fueled by Michigan citizens. As you know, Proposal 18-2 was very successful and won overwhelming support from voters on the statewide ballot. Some independent national assessments now consider Michigan's congressional maps the least gerrymandered in the country. Unlike most ballot committees, we didn't stop after the proposal won. Voters Not Politicians was committed to seeing the entire redistricting process through to ensure that Proposal 18-2 was implemented the way voters intended and that it produced fair maps through a transparent process. Our volunteers got to work in 2019 to hold educational events and application workshops through which we identified more than 10,000 people who were interested in serving on Michigan's very first independent redistricting commission. We even provided free notary services when the pandemic prevented many applicants from getting their applications notarized. And after the MICRC got to work, our volunteers monitored and took notes on hundreds of hours of their meetings. We know from experience that when Michigan makes structural changes like this, that those have to be followed up with very strong implementation efforts. So we're just as active with Proposal 22-2. Our volunteers know that the job's not done yet, and we're currently building over 200 teams across the state who are committed to helping with the successful implementation of the amendment. After our successful redistricting reform effort, it was clear that there were more opportunities to strengthen our democracy and to continue to harness the power of our huge, motivated volunteer community. At that point, it was clear that our mission is to put citizens at the center of policymaking. Again, this is aligned with that first line of Michigan's Constitution: all political power is inherent in the people. Ending state-level gerrymandering was critical for making our voices count and all voices, or our votes count and all of our voices heard. But we are a pro-democracy organization, not just an anti-gerrymandering organization. So our work also focuses on making sure all voices are heard and every vote is counted. That means elections must be safe, modern, and accessible, which was the focus of much of our work starting in 2020 and which continues today. Another part of our work is educating voters on structural and systemic reforms beyond redistricting. This includes improving Michigan's rules around transparency and conflict of interests, and reducing the corrosive influence of money in politics through campaign finance reforms. Through ongoing education and voter engagement, we're making sure voters consider democracy and how candidates stand on pro-democracy and pro-voter policies when they cast their votes. Because we have volunteers and supporters all over Michigan, we're able to encourage and support voters to take direct action in their communities. And, true to our roots, we continue to lead successful initiative campaigns. We followed up on our successful 2018 campaign with another volunteer-driven effort in 2022 to get Proposal 22-2 on the ballot and to a win. We have the most effective volunteer signature collection apparatus in the state of Michigan. We're known for our volunteers showing up with their clipboards at libraries, at rest stops, anywhere from there to the taco festival, but we're also able to mobilize door knocks, phone calls, and other volunteer actions in places many organizations cannot. In 2023, our areas of focus are grassroots implementation of Proposal 2, voter education and engagement, and grassroots advocacy for pro-democracy policies, including legislation that will be considered in this committee. Our volunteers are engaging with partner organizations and local clerks in their communities to identify challenges and support implementation of the voting access improvements that we added to the state constitution as a result of Proposal 2. Our volunteers will also get to work to educate voters on the new, more convenient voting options that will be available to them. We have civic engagement programs underway on college campuses and are piloting adult civic education programs in selected cities that are focused on engaging people with their local governments. And our intention is to expand these efforts in the coming months and years. And the thousands of people who have volunteered with us over the years, and in fact that's more than 8,000 people, remain deeply committed to strengthening democracy through legislation. They are in your district and ready to work with you to advance pro-democracy policies. We're identifying at least one volunteer legislative liaison in each House and Senate district in the state. You may have already met some of our volunteers at an in-district coffee hour. These volunteers are making sure you hear directly from your constituents on democracy issues. And these liaisons will share information about your policy positions with the VNP teams in your district, and those teams are ready to mobilize to support pro-democracy and pro-voter reforms. Our policy priorities this year fit into three major categories. First, ethics and transparency, notably including the implementation of the financial disclosure provisions in Proposal 22-1. We're also focused on campaign finance reform, but of course what's most relevant to this committee is free and fair elections. After all the work we did with the Promote the Vote 2022 coalition to get Prop 2 on the ballot and passed, we are, as I've mentioned, 100% committed to seeing that it's implemented successfully. While I understand this committee does not control the budget, VNP does call for full funding to support the equitably distributed drop boxes, ballot tracking, 9 days of early voting, all the things that voters called for in that constitutional amendment. Much of this implementation, including drop boxes and postage, has to be done before the upcoming elections in May for the communities that are holding them. Also, enabling legislation is required to fully implement the provisions of the amendment. That legislation will include early voting, permanent vote by mail, the signature match and cure process, and ballot tracking. We encourage the legislature to move as quickly as possible to give clarity and to support the local clerks so that they have the time and resources they need to provide voters with everything that is constitutionally required of them. A few weeks ago, I testified to this committee in support of House Bills 4127 and 4128, which would prohibit firearms wherever people vote. And our volunteers will continue to enthusiastically support those bills as they move through the process. We also support legislation to protect election workers and voters from harassment, intimidation, and interference. In a healthy democracy, citizens must be able to vote without fear, and those who serve to administer our elections have to be safe and protected. We also support the Michigan enactment of the national popular vote. When the threshold of 270 electoral votes is reached, the compact will ensure that all votes will count in presidential elections in this country. VNP supports ending the practice of prison gerrymandering. Prison gerrymandering is the practice of counting incarcerated people in their prison locations instead of at their last known address. This results in distorted representation between communities with prisons where the incarcerated people are not able to vote, and those communities to which those incarcerated people are likely to return after serving their sentences. And we also support legislation to end county-level gerrymandering. Political manipulation of lines is just as undemocratic at the county level as it is at the state level. If all political power is in fact inherent in the people, then voters must choose their representatives instead of the other way around. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. I am just curious. You mentioned that voters, not politicians, want to end the corrosive influence of money in politics. How much did the your organization spend on Proposal 2?
How much did we spend on proposal?
Yes.
On proposal?
22-2.
On 22-2? I believe that all of our contribution to Proposal 22-2 was in kind through our providing them with signatures.
Okay. Do you have a number of what your in-kind donations were?
I don't have that at my fingertips,
Okay.
but we counted that as the fair market value of those signatures, so it's fairly substantial because we collected more than 170,000 signatures.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Wagella.
Thank you
for the presentation today. I had a question about campaign finance reform. So I think we all know that Citizens United has a disastrous effect on our country. What state level changes do you think we can make now to help with this problem?
Well, there are several options. We are exploring quite a few. You're right that Citizens United really limits those options since the Supreme Court decided that corporations are people. But they also said that corporations are defined as an association of citizens. And something that concerns us at VNP is that corporations are increasingly they have increasing foreign investment. It used to be about 5% of U.S. companies were owned by foreign individuals or entities. That's up to about 40% now. So those foreign corporations, or those multinational corporations, are finding a way to influence our elections through independent expenditures and ballot measures that they can't do individually. Foreign actors are not allowed to directly give to any candidate in any race in the United States of America. So foreign influence corporations are one thing that we're looking at. We think that disclosure rules can be better than they are. We also think that there's some opportunity with public financing of campaigns to kind of outweigh some of those big special interests and amplify the voices of small donors.
I have a question, and then we'll see if we have some other questions. So you mentioned when you were talking about implementation, you mentioned May. What were you referring to when you said that you were hoping would happen in May?
Well, our understanding is that because of the amendment, Proposal 22-2 amendment, that early voting is not required until statewide elections, but that the drop boxes and postage requirements do take effect in the next election, which in many communities is this May.
Thank you. I was just curious what component you were referring.
Not early voting, right?
to.
Although
Okay.
I know some clerks are deciding to offer early voting earlier. I don't know of anybody doing that in May.
Sure.
But the interpretation that we understand is correct is that the drop boxes and postage are required
Sure.
much sooner.
Yeah, because our goal is, definitely to have the early voting legislation in place before our summer break, but not before, probably not before May. Perhaps through this committee, but there's probably going to be some other steps we need to take, and we are looking at implementation legislation for the drop boxes as well as the. Sorry, brain freeze here. At what you just mentioned with the prepaid postage. So I'm not sure if that's actually also going to be in place. However, I know the Secretary of State is taking steps on the postage without moving forward as the proposal allows. So thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Yes.
Representative DeBoyer.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of things I couldn't help but notice, and I applaud you for your work. And again, I think I said this last time, but it was probably the best explanation of the process that I've heard to this point. Honestly, I mean that sincerely. So, but I did see, you did focus on democracy, which obviously is a very important thing in our country and our state. And you are a state organization, right?
Correct.
You're not a national affiliate or anything like that. It's
Correct.
strictly state of Michigan. Okay. But your presentation was a little bit short on the term republic, which is what we truly are as a republic, right? We're elected republic. There's a discussion going on right now, and forgive me because I was not on the committee perhaps when you presented on the national popular vote. And I'm having this discussion about good, bad, indifferent about the national popular. And I sincerely want your take on this question that I have posed that I've not got a great answer, but you may have one. And it is that, how do I explain to the constituents of my district or the citizens of Michigan that if we potentially were to overwhelmingly vote for a candidate for president of the United States, we would then allocate, and that person not be the one that got the national popular vote, we would then allocate our electorate to the other individual. And how does that represent, in a republic, how does that represent our constituents in a good manner? And I haven't yet got a great answer, and you may have one, and I don't mean that with any disrespect. I legitimately want to get to the end of that good answer there.
Well, so the national popular vote wouldn't take effect until there are states with 270 electoral votes that sign on. So at that point, then if those states all agree to use the results of the national popular vote, then we're no longer voting as a state, we're voting as a country. So the winner of that national popular vote across the entire country wins the presidential election. I mean, that is it at its core, where it isn't. You no longer focus on sort of a winner-take-all state-by-state situation. Every vote in every state in the country is then equally counted in the presidential election.
Right, and so I've heard that position, and the issue that I'm struggling with trying to make my decision on that is I don't represent California, I don't represent Texas, I don't represent Arizona, I represent Michigan exclusively, and I represent the constituents of my district exclusively. So I'm struggling with, voting on an issue to not represent them exclusively. So, but I appreciate your candor on that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I don't see any other questions. But thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your work. We look forward to working with you on all of the things that you have talked about. Hopefully we'll get to some of these things sooner rather than later, although some of them might be a little bit more down the line. Absolutely, Proposal 2, there's going to be a lot of work on that in the next few months here. So thank you again for your work.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
There being no further business before the committee stands adjourned.